Hey guys, Hanor here. Alright, in this episode, this is about German high-tier prop planes, and this is based on a user request. Now, it's been a little while since I've flown the higher tier prop planes in the German tree myself, but going back and flying them, I definitely see why this request is happening, because there's a lot of issues that I've noticed. To try and help improve gameplay in this, I'm starting from the top and working way down. And first I'm going to start off with the ME or BF 109 K4 aircraft. Now this plane, already from the get-go, a lot of people are saying it's terrible. However, there are some really strong points about this aircraft that you can utilize to improve your fighter gameplay with it. Now, anywhere above 15,000 feet or around 5,000 meters, the aircraft becomes very heavy and turns like a bus. So as long as you can keep your combat below that altitude, you can generally do alright. And you gotta remember that this is an energy fighter, it's not a turn fighter. And a lot of the younger 109 series aircraft, such as the G2, the F4 series, and so forth, can kind of trick you on this part, but they're definitely not turn fighters. So make sure that you're doing radial turns, which are turns that are pitching up in the horizon, and not doing slicing turns that are more suited for turn fighting. You want to keep your energy higher than your opponent, and this also means that you got to be aware when to leave. Like right now, I am running from this Bearcat because he has a higher energy over me. Now, I saw him break away. This is my opportunity to gain an energy position over him. Now, my K4 is fully maxed out, so some of these performance issues might be a little stronger without upgrades, so be aware of that. However, like I said, the performance of the aircraft is much better at higher, or at a medium to lower altitude than between the 15,000 and 20,000 foot range, or above 5,000 meters. Another strong point about this aircraft is that its firepower is very good. Most German aircraft have very strong firepower, so don't be afraid to do head-ons, especially if you get your aim down. And if you don't, use this opportunity to improve your aim. As you get used to where the bullets are going to land at the distance, you can start heading on and just destroying your opponents. And luckily enough, a lot of the times you're going to find yourself facing B-17s, which means you can just switch over to the 30 millimeters, or at least keep the one in your nose and just use it individually on your targets, which I will do in some later clips of the K4. Now that we've covered some of the fundamentals of the K4, let's step back a moment and let's also start to talk about enemy aircraft that you're going to be going up against, the opposition, for instance. Okay, first of all, I'm going to talk about the Bearcat, the F9F Bearcat. Now, the Bearcat is basically a flying engine that has extremely good lift value with its wings, which is the reason why that thing accelerates so well and can turn at such high speeds. However, this is also the reason why its dive speed has only so much of a maximum area. Because of the lift value on that aircraft, it can only reach so much of a dive speed before it would shear its wings off. The K4 can outdive it in the long run for speed. However, like I said, you just got to be aware. You got to give it enough space because it can accelerate really fast. It's a heavy aircraft. It can accelerate much faster in that dive than you can initially. So be aware of this, and if you commit to a dive, don't let him trap you below, because if he gets you in an energy trap down below, then he's going to win. You're just going to have to get enough energy to get away from him, and then you're going to have to start running. His top speed, like I said, cannot exceed the K4's, and eventually you will overstretch him and actually get away. Now, the next big opponent's going to be the Griffin Spitfires. The Griffin Spitfires are very fast, very maneuverable, Basically, though, they're pretty much in the same boat as the Bearcat, except for they accelerate even better and their top speed's higher because they actually have a slightly less of a lift variable compared to the Bearcat. So, but if you can get them to turn, much like most, my other videos with meteors and everything, if you can get them to turn, then they generally will bleed enough energy for you to run for a little bit. However, you're just gonna have to be very, very aware that this is gonna be one of the issues that you're gonna run into. Now, one of the last contenders that you're gonna run into, well, it's not the last, but one of the last American contenders that you're gonna run into is going to be the Mustangs. Now, Mustangs accelerate extremely well, and they can dive actually faster than your K4 for a brief period of time. However, at these speeds, they are hitting extreme amounts of forces, and any maneuvering that they do can really screw them up. So don't be afraid to dive from them. Let them get to that point and then start to do some turns with them. Chances out of 9 out of 10 they will either wreck themselves or they're going to dope themselves in a meaningful way for you to mess them up. The last major contender that you're going to probably come across often is going to be the LA9. And the LA9, do not try to head on that aircraft. It has got 423s in the nose. And that is definitely more firepower than you have. And it's very much like a Bearcat. It's fast, it turns really well. You have a top speed advantage on it though. So you're going to have to treat that very similar to a Bearcat as far as escape measures go, and then set up for your dominance over them. Now, I didn't have any footage of the G10 in this episode, and the reason why I don't have that footage is because my experience with the G10 has actually been very, very crappy lately, because the slightest bit of damage, and I'm talking about the lightest shade of red that you can have, all of a sudden turns the flight characteristics of that aircraft into a flying bus. So from here, I move on into the TA-152. Now the TA-152 has pretty good firepower. It's got two 20s and a 30 in the nose. However, actually some of its lower preceding predecessors have a little bit more because they have the two 13mm MGs as well. And a lot of my opponents with this aircraft has been mainly bombers. You do have the firepower to give the bombers a mighty hurt and destroy, a bomber or two. But however, it feels like ammo is much more limited in this aircraft than in other German designs. The maneuverability of this aircraft is much better than any other Focke-Wulf design. It's by far the most maneuverable. However, its climb rate is the poorest. And even though this aircraft is more maneuverable than other Focke-Wulfs, this doesn't mean that you can outmaneuver every opponent that you come across. Remember that the Bearcats, the Spitfires, and the LA9 are probably the most maneuverable high-tier aircrafts in the game. The P-51s are very maneuverable, but you could probably give them some trouble. Now I moved on to the D-12 because everything else that pertains to the TA-152 also pertains to this. It is pretty much a boom-zoom aircraft. Now, just as before stated with the K4, all the fundamentals pretty much apply with these aircraft as well. You pick targets that set themselves up in the weaker positions. You use that for your plane strength, which is energy. You come in and you strike them. And apparently this guy wanted that kill too. I didn't even know he was going for it. But you're going to run into a lot of problems with the German teams. As I discovered, you have a lot of players that are very unforgiving and ready to just shoot you down. One thing I can recommend is make them pay for it. Jump out, give the lines to them, and go fly another game. There's going to be often times where you're going to find yourself facing jet fighters as well. Like you can see that P-80 in this match. You're going to have to treat them just like any other aircraft, except for you're going to have to treat them as that they have higher energy than you, which means that you can generally outturn them. So that is the one aircraft that I would suggest that you can actually turn fight with. And if you have a high enough advantage over them, you can actually dive and pick up just as much speed as they have, long enough to stay on to them to gun them down. But please don't try to do this from too many miles away, because if you do this too far away, they're just going to outrun you, and you just threw all your energy away to get to lower altitude for nothing. See, I did a radial turn. He's trying to do a radial turn as well, but he's slower at it because he is a turn fighting aircraft. Just gave me a good opportunity for shots on him. And those shots killed his engine, so he's going to be going down in just a moment. There he goes. Alright, moving on to the A8. Now this is actually one of my favorite Focke-Wulf designs. Why? Because it still has the thicker wing set. I'm a little bit more of a turn fighting player. This thing has high energy, and the thicker wings doesn't mean that it can outturn a Bearcat or a Spitfire. However, it is still a really amazing aircraft, and its maneuverability being that much better, it just speaks a lot of volumes to me. Once again, this is a high energy aircraft, and you pretty much have to treat it pretty much all the same. All these German aircraft, they're a lot more outside the playstyle of what people expect. People expect to go and they expect to dogfight. And in these aircraft, you can dogfight. You just got to know the proper way to do so. And the proper way to do so is kind of difficult to fathom. Now right there, I did a barrel roll attack in my dive because I saw that he was turning. And so I did that to actually set myself up for better hits. And I got pretty good hits on him. Utilizing these are going to strengthen your gameplay, and forcing yourself to become better with lag displacement rolls and barrel roll attacks are going to be very crucial for these higher tier German aircraft. I should have done another lag displacement roll right there. However, that still worked out. Still close enough. And he is down. Now I realize I'm being chased, so I decide to use my plane's strengths and I go and run it. You can't be afraid to run it out in the German aircraft because you are not a turn fighter. So you have to, like I said, you have to play to your strengths, you have to set them up into your strengths. And while I'm running it, I see this Typhoon, so I decide I'm going to go hit him instead. I did that displacement roll, it helped me get a little bit better of a vantage point on him. But now this guy just pulls right in front of me. The guy that was chasing me down, he was right in front of me. I couldn't believe it. Made it so easy. Okay, now I got more people chasing me. And one of the good things about these German aircraft, especially from behind, the shape of their fuselage generally makes them able to sustain a lot more abuse than most other aircraft. This is why I say run it out. Now, I noticed that it's probably a Griffin Spitfire. I assume that's behind me, and I know I'm just kind of boned here. So I'm just kind of doing some guns D, as well as also trying to do some turns that are more for my benefit, slowing him up. And luckily, that enabled my friendly ally guy to get over there and save me from a lot of hurt there. And that was the most beneficial thing that's ever happened for me in all my German flights in this match. And I just want to throw a big shout out there. If you ever watched my video, thank you so much for that help. And it set me up for a nice kill on that P-51. Alright, now I'm in the F8. And the F8 is actually a ground strike variant of a Focke-Wulf. So, there's some really cool things about this aircraft that a lot of people, I think, take for granted. Now, on Bulge, you get to air start. Not every map you get to. And when you get to the point in unlocking the 30s for this aircraft, these are high velocity 30s. These are not the 108s that are low velocity. This is high velocity 30 rounds. So they don't have a very bad drop rate. It's very much like you're shooting 20s, except for with all that punch. It's also an amazing aircraft to have for the mixed battles, because you get a big bertha of a bomb that you can carry. You can get a 1,000 kilogrammer bomb that you can carry underneath this plane, which is almost the size of the plane itself. I mean, it's just massive bomb. Plus, you know, I think 450 kilogrammers, but who cares about them? They don't really do nothing against tanks. But one of the things I love so much about this F8 is it's just so versatile. I mean, you have so many options for ground striking, as well as it can still be a devastating contender in the air. However, it's not designed to be that. But if you take off the 30 mils and you don't equip a ground strike code, it performs very similar to the A8 variant. And as long as you're using it much like you use your A8, you can actually do very well against the enemy aircraft that you're fighting. And it's a very tough fighter. You know, so much more so than most of the other fighters. Of its tier, that is. You know, because this is at the bottom end of the spectrum of the tier 4, so you're going to be fighting a lot of tier 3s. And so, its toughness is of a tier 4 higher tier aircraft to me. I mean, it's just very strong. And if you space out your 30s better, because that first episode I was reacquainting myself with this aircraft. I fly it all the time, I just haven't flown it in a little bit, so I was reacquainting myself with the guns in the aircraft. This episode is actually probably about 15 games or so later. Yeah, I was flying a lot of missions, making sure I wasn't forgetting any aspects about this aircraft, because it's been, like I said, it's been a good little while since I've flown it. Taking those little short bursts, I've already downed 2 aircraft, moving on. Now, one thing I want to note, I was only asked to really do this on the fighters, but I wanted to throw this out here too. The 410s are actually very nice aircraft, especially if you get them with upgrades. They maneuver very well now, so don't be afraid to actually use those heavy fighters. Now this B-17, he was going down earlier. I was leaving him alone, but he's doping himself and he's still flying under his own power, so I decided I'm going to go engage him. And I took him out. Now, you gotta be mindful, like I said, of things that are going on very much in the German games, because you end up pissing off these the German team players very often. Not, you know, actual German people, but the people that are playing the German aircraft, for some reason, get pretty upset. And next thing you know, you're getting shot at. Now, looking back at the footage, he was the guy that initially damaged that one B-17. But he didn't finish the job. He didn't watch over it very too well, you know. And my bad, dude. I wasn't trying to steal your kill, you know. So basically, in summary, you pretty much cannot outturn any fighter that you're coming up against, unless it's a jet aircraft. So keep that in mind, play to your strengths and use your strengths and you'll win. You can go to higher altitudes than the K4. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. But you definitely want to play to your strengths of your aircraft. Don't be afraid also to run away from the enemy for a little bit, luring them towards your teammates, letting them get into a better position for you to take them down. I know this is tedious and it's problematic in its own right, but that's pretty much your best options to do in these aircraft. There's nothing wrong with these aircraft. They're very, very great aircraft. It's just that most of the time people play them either too recklessly or they do things that are not very beneficial for the fighter. So you just want to keep this in mind. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please give me the big thumbs up and subscribe for future content to come. And good hunting. To red, you can keep weapon even in this state for a pretty good while before you'll even get a 2-minute warning. And amazingly, with this energy retention in the aircraft, once you start getting the countdown, that's when you should be a little concerned at that point. If you get towards a minute remaining on that countdown, you can throttle back to 0, keep your nose at the horizon or lower, and maintain your speed without the engine